Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords, and today I am doing a review of Wretched Epoque 2nd Edition. As you can see here, it's 2nd, and here is 1st. The Red Room this last year did basically reissues of expanded versions of all of their first run of RPGs. You can notice that the covers are clearly like this is the earlier one and this is the later one, and so it's showing you the change in quality of the AI at this point. This is a game. Well, this is now also a game. Well, this is a setting, anyways. This is a game that was about gritty adventuring, which could be, like pulpy, or it could be mystery, or it could be horror, in the era of the Belle Epoque, which is, for those of you who may not be aware of the term, it's sort of like the Gilded Age. It's from 1870 to 1913, I guess we'd say. It's basically a long period where the European nation states had been established. The big wars were over, right? Like there was, in the 60s, in the 1860s, you had the Civil War, and then you had the Franco-Prussian War, as well as the conflicts in Italy and Germany to establish those countries. That Italy and Germany, if you're American, you might not know, but Italy and Germany weren't countries until like the late 19th century. And so they were established as nation states in the Westphalian sense. And suddenly this was like the peak period in some ways of Western modernism, right? You had every nation state was strong and becoming prosperous, and you had, it was a glorious era for the British Empire, for the French. The Germans reunified themselves, the Italians unified themselves. Russia under the Tsar wasn't doing much, but it wasn't in chaos either. So it was a kind of a peak period, and it was a period of where suddenly there were much more people that had wealth and luxury and free time, and there was more art, and there was more poetry, and there was more of the culture in general, especially in the really big cities like London, Vienna, and Paris. And this was the time when great constructions were made, and it was really glorious, right? You had the Eiffel Tower, and you had things like that, and the great museums were at their peak, and the great artists were highlighted to everyone. So it was the era where you'd have the world's first millionaires having these unbelievably sumptuous balls that were like something out of fairy tales, and mad Bavarian princes constructing mansions that looked like from fairy tales too. All of that sort of stuff. So it had this glitz and glamour. But behind that, there was also a dirty, seedy underbelly, right? This was an era of moral degeneracy, and it became more so the further up you go. Like in the 1870s, it's a fairly morally restrictive culture, but by the 1890s, it's becoming pretty degenerate out there, right? And there's drugs and crime and prostitution become bigger issues, all kinds of vices, and then the dangerous ideas as well of things like anarchism and like early socialism, wanting to have revolutionary overthrows of the government, and there's all this stuff going on, right? And a completely golden exterior, and then a dark and sinister interior that can be very useful in any kind of campaign, and it certainly made purpose for other RPG campaigns in the past, and there's a lot of good stuff you can use for it. And Wretched Epoque was probably one of my favorite ones of the whole Wretched series in the first edition. Now, as you know, in the first edition, it has the complete set of rules that you have to use, and then it has setting. So, and that was, the first edition book was 200 and some pages. 228 would it be? Yeah, or no, 227, counting the appendix and not counting the lovely map it has of Paris here. That's a fantastic map of Paris. So 227 pages, but that included the rules. Now, with second edition, what the Red Room has done is it has created a single RPG core book called, I think it's just called the Wretched System or Wretched RPG. And I believe that downloadable, like if you want it printed, you have to pay, obviously, but it could be downloaded for free if I'm not. I might be wrong. I know that at some point you could. I don't know. Maybe now they're charging for it. I'm not sure. But the core system, which is, again, it's OSR. It's very much the same system. But they decide that instead of reprinting a new and specified set of rules in every book, they're going to put the core rules in the core system, and then everything else becomes setting material. So that means, now this book, you will notice the second edition book has considerable more size than the first edition. So it does not have 226 pages. It has, let us see here, there's the map again, 338 pages. Okay, so that's a considerable jump. But it's even more so when you realize that now it doesn't have any of the core rules in it. This, not half, but an important bit of the book was taken up by rule mechanics that mostly repeated what there was in the other Wretched books, right? So now with one core Wretched rule book, they get rid of that, and so this is all setting. I mean, it's not technically all setting because there's a couple of, I think, additional rules that are just for this setting. But again, any rule that isn't just for this setting is not in there, right? You have here also, this is the Wretched Epoque is a setting that they had an adventure which is a crossover with Invisible College, which makes perfect sense because the Invisible College in the 1880s and 90s would have been very much at its peak. It was having a great time. So here you have this is the order of contents, and you can see that there's various things you can do with this game. This is a setting that allows you to decide how you want it to be. You could play a completely historical game if you wanted. You could play one that's like, no magic, no monsters, nothing that doesn't exist in the real world, but, maybe it's a pulp detective sort of a campaign, right? Or a kind of guns for hire campaign or something like that. But if you want to, you can have stuff like, mad scientists and magic and otherworldly stuff from the beyond. So you can kind of choose. As you can see, the book is very well written, as are most of the, or very, very good layout, I mean to say, as are most of the Wretched products. They have very nice decorations. The art is, I believe, mostly AI art, although some of this, some of it certainly looks like it could be duty-free, not duty-free, what's it called? Copyright-free historical artwork, right? But it's kind of hard to tell. And some of these, like, is that a real photo? At this point, we're not even sure. I suspect some of this stuff is actually real, and some of it is just very clever AI. That's real. That's the photo of Helena Petrona Blavatsky there. So here you have an example. There's definitely stuff that can relate to kind of secret society stuff, magic, the occult in the 1880s. Well, basically like from the 1870s onwards, but especially like in the 1880s and 1890s, the occult was a very big deal among certain classes. And so you could certainly have characters who are agents of the Invisible College. Dreyfus Affair, that's actually, I think the adventure they did as a crossover with Invisible College was directly connected to the Dreyfus Affair. And then you have, here you have a list of sources of kind of books that they recommend if you want to have stuff that's like supernatural. And then you have some new rules. So you've got the different occupations. So examples of things you can play is a consulting or covert operative, consulting detective or covert operative, spy, daredevil, celebrity, a cocotte, That is to say, a lady of loose morals. Criminal masterminds. Phantom. So this is a man of mystery, basically. Gambler, citizen of the world, explorer. These are all things that basically mostly rich and idle people spent their time doing. Mad scientist. Well, yeah, even there were certainly certain. Yeah, Tesla was around in the 1990s, so yes, even mad scientists were a real thing in the 1890s, right? So again, all of this can be used like as original or as in the world as it really was with nothing added to it, or you can make it part of some kind of fantasy or sci-fi or horror or magic or whatever campaign. They added some life path tables, which I think are quite good. I suspect they were a bit inspired by my own, and that's all good with me because that's what the OSR is for. And this is a good way to give your character a little bit of background, especially to put it in the context of the setting, right? That's essentially my background table roles for when you're creating character is a way to integrate you into settings, especially settings that not every player knows, right? Like early medieval Poland. Well, if you're running a game, especially in North America, and you're setting it in 1882 Paris or Vienna, then it's probably good to give the character something else to go off of. So then we have STDs, of course. This is still a wretched game, so it indicates situations where there is undesirable stuff going on, and it is still about vice and what have you. There are events for carousing, drinking and gambling and whoring. Then you have a section on adversaries, right? And these are like different creatures from folklore, Lovecraftian like entities or other opponents, I guess. So, you got the color out of space there, a big owl, demons, doppelganger, right? It's good. The whole thing, even like the typeset of the book gives it a kind of old Victorian feel to it. Amigo. So, good set of stats here for all the different things you might need to run into. Let me just pull this over. You'll notice this is slightly bigger than the old school companion. It's it is still smaller, obviously, than Dark Albion because Dark Albion is a large size book. But other than that, so it's quite good. It's quite a good collection of material. Some of these things were, of course, in the original book, in the original edition. But I think that you're going to get some expansion on the material. Sorry, I should have this over here. Some expansion on the material that they had in the previous book. If you're like trying to figure out whether you should get this or not. That's AI. I'm pretty sure. I think it's clearly, because I know like that picture is based on something, but it's not. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so you got stuff on Rosicrucians, the Golden Dawn, Theosophical Society. So there's just a lot of information here of stuff that you can use, and the interesting thing is that it's not set in such a way that because they could have said, well, this is just an occult game, right? Or this is just a weird sci-fi game, or this is just a Lovecraftian horror game. But instead, they just said, well, look, this is the setting, and the setting lends itself to all those things. In some ways, those things all started here, like Victorian horror started in the 1880s, for the most part. You're not counting Frankenstein, which wasn't really a horror novel if you actually read the novel, right? And, obviously the Lovecraftian tales, the eerie tales started in that time too, and of course detective novels, that it was the era of Sherlock Holmes, so it's really got the whole deal. Cults, criminal masterminds. So here you get a lot of material that you can then choose what things you want to have and what you don't. to deal in your game, right? And in some ways, it can be that like if there's one kind of criticism you can give is you could say, well, then what happens though is that this makes it such that I'm not going to ever use the whole book, right? I mean, I guess that's true, but it does. But you know, if you're running the campaign you want to run, you don't have to. On the other hand, if you do want to use the whole book, why not just go whole hog, right? The whole Belle Epoque all together, right? Like, yes, there are Lovecraftian things. There are secret societies that have real magic. There are evil murder mysteries afoot, international criminal masterminds that have to be stopped. All of it together. Why not? You know, you could do that too. Here you get to a section that I thought was very interesting, the Apaches of Paris, which is about basically the criminals underground of Paris around the turn of the century, and I think it's very. I haven't done the research myself to know how much of this is like real or whether this is something that was invented. But it sounds very real from like experience of other sort of criminal underworlds that I have investigated over the years as a historian. So if this is the real thing, you know, well, here it talks about it, right? They have been but that's just talking about how this is still inside the setting, right? So you get. You know, I think that this might be based on some real stuff, but I'm not sure. It's certain. If it's not, it's certainly really, really believable. You know, and then you get a whole deal with all the specific gangs of Paris. So one of the things you can do is a kind of gangs of Paris campaign in here. You know, then we have stuff on mesmerism. Like it goes all over the place. I would say maybe it could have made more sense, perhaps, with this kind of book to start out by saying, look, these are the different types of campaigns. You can have supernatural horror, you can have crime, you can have secret societies, you can have weird science, and you can pick and choose however many of these you want, and then set it up so that you're like dividing it into those genres, right? So that they're all in there, but you put them in the genre. You do like a city guide to Paris, like we're seeing here. But in each section, you put in, I don't know, maybe specific like little boxes saying, you know, like headline secret societies, right? And you say there that you know, there's this cult that works in the crypts beneath the Paris streets, and you know, whatever like that, right? So you could, so that you make it, because here it's all kind of mingling together. With the implication that the DM will include the things he wants to and not include the things he doesn't, right? And that's fine. And you know, I think most people who get a Wretched book anyways have to be pretty advanced, because they're not just like some newbie that I very much doubt some newbie's just going to stumble on the Red Room store and find this book, right? So there are people who've already had experience with RPGs, and so it's probably not strictly necessary to do that. But I do think that it could have been better to have like some slight more guide to structuring your game and how you could structure it. But you know, this is a very small quibble. I'm perfectly content with this game for myself, right? I just think maybe someone who had either less historical knowledge than me or less experience DMing than me could find it a bit overwhelming. I'm not sure. So there's lots of stuff on it, like very, very great amount of information on actual real locations. I'm not sure about the Apaches, but I am sure about most of what is being put in here in terms of like, you know, the big places in Paris in the turn of the last century. So it's really like you could certainly run a Parisian campaign with this book, and you'd have a lot to go with, right? And there's even like price lists that are based on the time. Then you have like other locations, right? Everything from Australia to China, to India, Japan, other parts of the U.S. And here's a section on game mastering, which comes right at the back end of the thing, 293. It says, characters are typically investigators. It's paramount to bear in mind the tenet of the Wretched game. Characters might unexpectedly find themselves under investigative spotlight due to captivating narrative twists. And, it certainly goes along with the idea. The original idea of the Wretched series was that all PCs are basically scummy, because I think that's the kind of game that the Red Room likes to run. And since then, they've changed that so you can be, virtuous or vice-filled. Certainly, the world of Belle Epoque, morality is a very important part of that context, because then what you have in that world are people who are sometimes almost of puritanical virtue. And then you have people that appear to be of puritanical virtue, but have secrets that are corrupt, right? They're part of that secret underbelly. And then you have people who are openly bohemian and are acting in violation of the moral standards of the late Victorian era, and are doing it with like abandon and think they're untouchable. People like Oscar Wilde, for example. And, this is something that creates scandal in the world of the high society of the Belle Epoque. And then you have people who are who are vile in every way and exist in the margins and the fringes or behind the shadows, and may, twist other people's morality into that kind of degeneracy also. So you have like all these great different options, and those are things that I think would have to be something that you should really consider in this. Like, this kind of game should be a game that is about not just like dangers of a physical nature, but dangers of a moral nature, right? Like, what are your values strong? Is the world that you live in as real as you thought it was? So, and that's not something that is fully developed here, I think. But a lot of stuff is, and I think that a lot of the important stuff that you're going to need is going to be very well developed here. And it tells you about, you can have different factions, and you can incorporate supernatural elements, and then it's got guides to creating adventures. So I think that in a way, like, you could say the default here would in fact be that you could, like, the world of the Wretched Epoque would have everything in it, right? Like, you don't necessarily just have to have one weird thing in it. It could have all the weird things, or it could have none, and you could be running like a purely historical campaign. And then you get some introductory scenarios, right? So the first one is Soirée d'ouverture à lumière sombre, which is the dark light. It is about characters who are attending a burlesque show, and there's a setup of characters, and it's interesting how, like, so the player characters, these are, I guess, the recommendations are that you run these characters, right, or at least characters that can fit these elements: a police inspector, an aggrieved relative, an orphan, etc. And then there's a show that is performed, and then there's something to do with a murder. Four different plots: a police inspector, consulting detective, an aggrieved relative that is looking for certain paperwork, an orphan who has to confront painful memories, a book thief who is unable to find the book they covet. And so there's a dinner party. It's I guess this is a classical sort of murder mystery, with a variety of possible outcomes. Scenario 2, the expedition. This is about a character's journey. It's got a long set of like in-setting literature. characters are going to either the Amazonian or African jungle. It's like the Red Room doesn't really care. Those are the same to them, but okay. And then they're going to the cap. I mean, in the context of like pulp novels of the 1880s, that's true, right? Essentially, if you're buying in Paris, let's say, a dime novel about an expedition, it wouldn't really matter if it was the African or the Amazon jungle, because the story would be the same, right? Then we get some more appendixes. These are some random encounter tables based on the greater arcana of the tarot and the minor arcana, actually. No, so the whole tarot, it would seem. Then you have a collection of Parisian slang. And I know some of these. I'm familiar with a few of them. And there's a few I know from this era that I don't see here. But, yeah. I'd tell you what a Mumrath was, but I don't know if that would be good for the video's reach. So next, you have the worldview. The world of Belle Epoque character alignment would obviously be defined from a worldview from a rationalist to mysticist. That's actually a very good idea, I think. Though again, I would go further in terms of like, what is your character's moral posture, right? Because as much as rationalism versus the mystical, basically the Enlightenment modernists versus the romanticists was a major struggle, a major philosophical struggle. What was happening around that was also this struggle of attempting to maintain Western morality in a world where, to quote Nietzsche, God was dead, right? So that there was, and this was perhaps even more defining, I think. I think maybe that section about character worldview might have been better off in the beginning. But again, these are all minor quibbles. The book is quite fantastic. Here you have it. Takes place in the period between 1871 and 1914, ending when World War I starts. The time of Simone Simonini and many other characters, Edgar Allan Poe, etc., etc. The Dreyfus Affair, secret societies. It's not yet pulp, not quite historical. It's neither the right time or the right mood for steampunk or diesel punk. We're welcome to the wretched times of nouveau punk. I kind of like that. Okay. Yeah, that is the second edition of Wretched Belle Epoque. If you have the first one, do you need the second? I don't know. It's going to have somewhere over 100 pages of more material. But does that necessarily mean it's going to be worthwhile to you? I don't know. It depends how much you like the first one. If you don't have the first one, you should definitely get the second one because it has like 100 pages more material, and there's going to be, so it's an expanded version, like I don't think that you're going to go wrong with that. If you enjoyed it, if you enjoy the concept, you should definitely check this out because it is, to me, I really love most of the material in here. It is for me a fantastic source book for something I haven't used yet, but I mean I'm sure at some point I'm going to be running something in our world or a close enough version of our world between 1880 and 1910, and I'm pretty sure that this book will be very handy for me at that time. Okay, so that is my best recommendation. Right, I've got so many RPG books that I've gotten over the years that I have to have, like I have a storage room that's got shelves and shelves and shelves of RPG books, and that's where I put the ones that basically I know I'm never going to read again, or I'm almost never going to use again. And then I have another bookshelf that's in a kind of awkward place that has a whole ton, like again, an entire bookshelf worth of RPG books that I might at some point maybe once a year look at or something, that it might be necessary, though probably 98% of them I will not look at even once in the year. And so then I have another bookshelf, which is books that I might refer to, some of them, a certain percentage, at least once or twice in a year. And then I have one bookshelf, which obviously has the least number of books, but it's still a lot of books. I mean, it's still like, it's four levels of bookshelf, and it's got enough room for, I don't know, 20 books in each one, or something like that. And those are the books that I use all the time, right? And I would say Wretched Epoque, it's not a book I'm going to use all the time, but it'll certainly sit in the second tier, right? It'll sit in the next category over, because it's a book I don't want to misplace, right? I know that if at any time I'm going to be looking for stuff to use for this kind of setting, this is going to be a good book for me to have, all right? So do check that out. And if you like this video, remember that reviews never get as much views as other videos, and so if you want to help me out, please share the video. Share it anywhere you think people find this sort of stuff interesting. You can check out Wretched Epoque at the Red Room store. I will put the link in the description to this video. And you will, while you're there in the Red Room store, you will be able to check out the Pundit Files. We are now at issue, I believe, 25 of the Pundit Files, which is the Wild West timeline, which corresponds to this same time, right? Like the Wild West timeline is from 76 or 75, from 1870 at the year to about 1893, right? So it's within the era that was the Belle Epoque. It's just in a place where the Belle Epoque was happening to other people and not to the people in the Wild West. They had a whole other thing going on. Though, you could say that like when Tombstone was at its peak, it had some of the Belle Epoque there, right? They had an ice cream parlor in Tombstone, right? They had like a bowling rink, like they had a swimming pool, right? Like these were wild things for a boom town of the Wild West to have, right? So there was a little bit of that. But anyway, so you can check out the Wild West timeline. Look at that. You can combine the Wild West timeline with Wretched Epoque, and you could make and then Wretched West or Wretched Country. I don't remember which one it's called. The Wild West Wretched book. And you would have a hell of a campaign then, right? So be sure to check that out, or check out any of my other Pundit Files books. Every single Pundit File issue is only $3.50. And check out all my other books. Links are going to be in the description of the video. You can get stuff like Dark Albion, which is about, the War of the Roses, and the Old School Companion. This is Old School Companion 1, which is basically full of material, again, historical sort of stuff. So if this is interesting to you, it's the Old School Companion 1 has a whole bunch of details of real magical grimoires that you can use to add elements of medieval style magic into your games. It has stuff on astrology. It has stuff on what did people do in the Middle Ages, stuff on culture, stuff on what real fairy lore was like in the Middle Ages. It's just a general guide to make your campaign more medieval authentic. And it obviously has a lot of source material for Lion and Dragon and Dark Albion, but you can use it for any OSR game. So be sure to check out those and all of my other books. The links are in the description. And of course, check out Wretched Epoque. And if you don't like Wretched Epoque, check out the other, they have a whole list of products, the Red Room, and most of their books are quite good. So be sure to take a look. By the way, I don't have any financial relationship with, I should mention, the Red Room. They don't pay me anything in that sense. I do have my Pundit Files series posted in their store, but that's not something that they're paying me to do or something like that, right? That's just me using their marketplace website, right? That's the only connection I have to them. So just so everybody knows, right? I don't make any money off of this, then I haven't been paid to do a review. None of that, right? Just wanted to clear that up before we finish. So that's everything for today. Currently smoking. This is a Near-Up poker with a military bit, which was also invented during the Belle Epoque. And inside there is Argento roots.